Kate, the 2025 Las Vegas Grand Prix is probably the first time I've ever heard somebody describe track conditions as a banana skin of a track, but it was such an accurate description from Jolyon Palmer of the track conditions at the beginning of qualifying. Because good lord, looking at the images on the screen and looking at like Leclerc's onboard dial-up, it looked so slippery on the circuit. I'm surprised only one driver crashed. But I mean, the fact that only one driver crashed kind of just speaks to the talent level on the grid and the caliber, the high caliber on the current grid. And with that, let's have a chat about the Las Vegas Grand Prix. If you couldn't have already gathered, that's what we're speaking about today. First of all, brilliant race from Max Verstappen. 10 out of 10, no notes, absolutely what he needed to do. It ended up being a dream scenario for him, not only winning the Grand Prix, but then the McLaren to get chucked out of the damn race. You know, Max needed something big to happen to really be in the fight. You know, I was thinking after the race, like, okay, the gap's 30 points between Norris and Piastri, Max is like 40-something points back. Unless something dramatic happens in Qatar, I think that's curtains on the championship fight. But then lo and behold, we didn't even have to wait until Qatar for something dramatic to happen. It happened after the race when the McLarens got disqualified for plank wear. It was very, very small margins, and the plank wear was, Norris's plank wear was 8. Of course, has to be minimum of 9mm, of course, and Norris was 8.88mm on the right-hand side front and 8.93 on the right-hand side rear. Meanwhile, Oscar had 8.96mm on the left-hand side front, 8.74 on the right-hand side front, and 8.90 on the right-hand side rear. Very, very fine margins, but these rules exist for a reason. The plank wear rules exist. It's in the regulations that, you know, you can't have less than 9mm, and they were under, so that's always disqualification. They argued mitigating circumstances. This is what the document said. The team argued that mitigating circumstances existed in that there was additional and unexpected porpoising at this event, limited opportunity to test due to the weather on day one, and a shortened practice session. Further, the team submitted that the degree of the breaches was lower than the prior breaches of this regulation in 2025. The FIA argued that unfortunately there was no provision in the regulations or in precedent for any penalty other than the usual penalty, i.e. disqualification. Now first of all, I did actually go back and check Hamilton's plank wear disqualification from China, and yes, these disqualifications here are less than Hamilton's. They're correct on that point. I'm not sure what Hulkenberg's was from Bahrain though. I'll trust him that that was more than this. The mitigating circumstances. First of all, weather on day one. I thought it was day two the weather was bad, i.e. Friday/Saturday if you're not in America. I thought it was day two. I mean, I skipped FP2 because I'm not waking up at freaking 4 a.m. 3 days in a row. I decided to stay up for FP1 instead. FP1, weather conditions seemed fine, kind of what you'd expect for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Evening/night, cold, yes, but not that bad, dry. FP2, I looked back at the highlights, it didn't look wet, it didn't look that bad. It was day two, it was FP3 and qualifying that was hit by the weather. And second of all, on the shortened practice sessions, like red flag obviously, I'm sorry, but unless I looked back through FP2 and FP3, and I didn't see anything about McLaren specifically losing like a buttload of time in those practice sessions. They didn't in FP1. Everybody had this, the whole thing to me, they're mitigating circumstances that they argue. To me, it sounds like they were making excuses because they just didn't set the car up properly. Because everybody had the same weather conditions that McLaren had. Everybody had the same amount of practice time as McLaren had. But the other 9 teams managed to set their cars up fine and not get disqualified, or well, at least not get dinged for it anyway. You know what I mean? Hopefully. My point is, it just sounds like excuses to me. I don't know why they thought that would fly, but whatever. The McLaren did eventually make a statement about the whole thing. Here's Andrea Stella's statement. During the race, both cars experienced unexpected high levels of porpoising not seen in the practice sessions, which led to excessive contact with the ground. We are investigating the reason for this behaviour of the car, including the effect of the accidental damage sustained by both cars, which were found after the race, and that led to an increase of movement on the floor. As the FIA noted, the breach was unintentional, there was no deliberate attempt to circumvent the regulations, and mitigating circumstances also existed. We apologise to Lando and Oscar for the loss of points today at a critical time in their championship campaigns after 2 strong performances from them all weekend. As a team, we apologise for our partners and fans whose support means us so much. While this outcome is extremely disappointing, we remain fully focused on the last 2 races of the season. First of all, I don't buy the mitigating circumstances. Again, to me, it just sounds like excuses, but that's a statement. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong in thinking it just sounds like they set the car up too low, or I'm wrong, but whatever. We move on. All in all, like, it puts Max in a very good position now. 24 points down, tie with Oscar. At this point, if McLaren are smart, then they kind of just make the difficult decision to bin off Oscar's chances, and then they back Norris to make sure one of them wins the Drivers' Championship. Make sure McLaren actually wins the Drivers' Championship with one of their cars. But I'm gonna be honest, given we're talking about McLaren here, I'm not entirely sure they're gonna do that. I don't, frankly, that would be the smart thing to do, and this is McLaren in 2025 we're talking about. Like, it won't be easy for Max, but it is still very possible. You know, there's a sprint race as well. All it takes is, you know, Max winning. Say they finish right with each other in the sprint race. You know, not that big of a swing between, say, Max and Lando. And then in the Grand Prix, all it would take to put Max a lot more in it is, say, Max wins the Grand Prix, and then, you know, the Mercedes get in the way, or Oscar gets in the way between Max and Lando. Then Max is a lot closer to Norris, and it's game on for the final race of the season. It's not going to be easy for Max, as I said, but it's definitely possible for him. It's that classic of, do not count him out until the end. Until he's mathematically out of contention. But Norris is still in a very good position now. But McLaren are just... I swear to God, mind what Zach Brown said about how he'd rather have, like, Verstappen winning than playing favourites with his drivers? I swear to God, it's like McLaren are trying to manifest that scenario into existence. You know, because nothing surprises me now with McLaren's gaps, really. Like, it's like they're trying to invent their own version of Ferrarying called McLarening, and in the process, they're out Ferrarying Ferrari. And on that, like, picture this. All 10 teams are sat down around the table playing a game of Uno. And the last card played was a green 3, for example, and now it's Ferrari's turn. But in their hand, they don't have anything they can play. They don't have any green cards, they don't have any 3s, and they don't have any of the other extra cards you can play, a color change or a +4. They don't have anything, so they draw from the pile. And if the first card that they drew from that pile on it said, build a car that works in wet conditions, or draw 25, they're drawing 25 cards from that frickin' pile. Because here's the thing. If Lewis Hamilton was still driving for Mercedes and he'd gone out in P20 in Q1 on pace, like he'd set laps, that would surprise me. In the wet conditions as well. Like, if he was driving for Mercedes and what happened to him in qualifying happened, I'd be surprised. But because he's driving for Ferrari, it didn't surprise me that much. And also the fact that his track record this year, it's been a really difficult year for him. Like, it didn't surprise me. And it's not because Lewis Hamilton has forgotten how to drive in the wet. He has not. Lewis Hamilton is, like, in the top 5 wet weather drivers of all time. But you get my point. Lewis Hamilton has not forgotten how to drive in the wet. Ferrari are shit in the wet. And on the other side of the garage, like, Leclerc is not bad in wet conditions. He's not bad in the wet, as so many people are always quick to say online. Everyone else says wet conditions is weakness. It's not. He is good in wet conditions. He can be good. We've seen it when Ferrari have actually been competent in the wet. But more often than not, Ferrari have just lost the plot in the wet conditions, and it's making him look bad. It's making Lewis look bad as well. I swear to God, there's only one thing I want Ferrari to do for their 2026 car, and that's actually build it so it works in the wet conditions. Ferrari, this isn't a new thing. We've known for ages that Ferrari are bad in the wet, but like, yeah, as I said, they need to sort it. Because you'd have to imagine if it hadn't been wet in qualifying, or Ferrari had actually been competent in the wet, maybe Leclerc, maybe he could have had a better race and actually gotten on the podium, because he did seem to have decent race pace. But then of course he was starting in 9th, which you're kind of just looking for damage control from there. You could argue that maybe if Ferrari had done the strategy a little bit differently, extended longer, maybe Leclerc could have, gotten onto the podium with the tyre offset. He'd have had a better chance to get past Piastri. But honestly, I don't buy it. I don't think Leclerc would have been able to overtake Piastri again after the pit stops. After Piastri undercut Leclerc, I don't think Leclerc was getting back past him. Because, first of all, to be fair, the only reason why Leclerc was able to get past Piastri was because Piastri made a mistake. That's nothing against Leclerc, it's just the fact that he wasn't great in a straight line because he had a bigger rear wing on, you know? But by the by, my point is Piastri couldn't even overtake Antonelli, and he had like 20 lap younger tires than Antonelli, so what makes you think Leclerc could have overtaken Piastri and been within 5 seconds of Antonelli to benefit from his penalty on younger tires than Piastri? Just, I don't know, that's just my thoughts, but anyway. On Kimi, by the way, just brilliant drive. One of his best drives of the season, if not his best. I was surprised that he went all that way on those tires he was on, but I mean, I suppose that's what you can do at a track where the deck is freaking zilch. He only got the podium by like 2/10 in the end, but he deserves the podium. For P17 up to the podium despite a penalty, honestly, stunning drive from the young Italian. Absolutely amazing. Now, elsewhere, Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton turned freaking invisible after qualifying. Lance Stroll, I didn't even notice that Lance Stroll retired early in the race until like 14 hours later. And I also completely forgot Yuki Tsunoda existed in that race for the same length of time. Really shows how much attention I was paying to the rear of the field, doesn't it? But anyway, overall, not an absolute worldie of a race, but not terrible either. It was alright. I'm not entirely convinced that the fountain show directed by Mickey Mouse at the end was strictly necessary, and apparently it wasn't even live either. But Qatar next. It's the last sprint weekend of the year and the championship is trying to get interesting again. Honestly, this championship fight has been so weird in that for a lot of it, it's been trying so hard to be interesting at times. But that's really only when Max has been getting involved. When it's just like between the McLaren drivers, I don't know, I just don't find it as interesting. Maybe it's because I'm like, we're not really seeing like Norris and Piastri fighting on the track. We're not seeing them wheel to wheel. I know they're teammates, but just because they're teammates shouldn't mean that they can't go wheel to wheel. It's a freaking motor race, for God's sake. I don't know, but we'll talk more about how good or not the championship fight was at the end of the season. I'm going to leave this one here. What did you think of the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.